Here's Russ.
So I used to love a show called The Superstars in the 80s. I was a young guy, and they would show all the good athletes doing all kinds of weird things. And,
I love this show.
Yeah, and so there's a video my brother sent today, and I'm pretty sure I saw it on The Superstars. It could be another show, but I'm pretty sure it was that 100-meter dash between Wayne Gretzky, Pele, Bjorn Borg, and
it was a basketball player, wasn't it?
Hold on, I'll get the other player.
Joe Montana.
No, it wasn't Joe Montana. No. Of course not my internet slow.
Well, it wasn't O.J. Simpson, even though he
It was not O.J. No. Oh, it was Sugar Ray Leonard.
Okay.
And so,
So let's go through these four people again. Who are these four people, Russ?
Bjorn Borg, Pele,
Gretzky, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Bjorn Borg.
Yeah,
right, got it. Okay.
I have to point out, at this point, Gretzky is the youngest of the four by a good stretch.
Okay, seriously, Mike.
Yes, he was.
Oh, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't make him faster because he's younger.
What does that have to do with it, Mike?
Because this is Mike's hatred towards Gretzky. That's why. Because I'm going to say the opposite and say, a lot of times we didn't give Wayne Gretzky credit for being a great athlete because he did all these things on the ice, but he did kill the competition. Now, Pele was older. Pele was 40, but Pele came in third. So, and boxers ran all the time. Sugar Ray Leonard would run all the time. Like
he had to be in great shape.
Who came in last?
Yeah, but
Bjorn Borg.
Yeah, Borg. I knew Borg was last. You know what we learned by the Superstars long before we knew anything about soccer is that soccer players are just such well-conditioned.
That's when I learned it. Kyle Rowe Jr.
Yeah, Kyle Rowe Jr.
Yeah,
kind of showed us. And the other one was, that pole vaulters are just,
Bob Seagren. Yeah.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
it's a great show, and it also worked its way into the Battle of Network Stars, right? Which was like a really bizarre show of where you took like people from sitcoms and put them into athletic situations.
And then it got weird. Then they went into the circus, this Battle of the Network Stars, like doing circus things. That's when things went awry.
For those fans of SCTV, the great Canadian show SCTV, where all the comics came from.
Yeah.
That led to Battle of the PBS Stars, which was like on SCTV, where they had Fred Rogers and Julia Childs in the ring fighting each other. That's just one of my favorite skits of all time. Anyway.
Well, what I remember about that show is there was I remember reading a newspaper article that Kyle Rowe Jr. and Seagren in particular really trained specifically for this event because the amount of money they can earn was significant for them. Obviously, some of the team sport guys were making, good money, but they were not making as good of money as they could have. So
I remember asking my dad too, like, where's Kyle Rowe Jr. come from? And like, I never heard of the guy. And then he told me about soccer, but he told me about his dad who played for the New York Giants, and he was a really good football player.
But that was sort of counterbalanced by, like, at least in the Battle of the Network Stars, by, like, I remember, like, John Davidson and Henry Crosby just being like, they couldn't, like, jump a pond. That's how bad they were. It was like, that was part of it. It was part of, these people who look cool on TV and then they're tripping over themselves. That was the good stuff.
Listen, there were some great athletes that did horribly in the Superstars.
Yes.
But I remember one who did really well, again, and he would get maligned for being a sub-200 hitter, but Dave Kingman was really good at the Superstars because he killed everybody in the rowing because this big, lanky guy with long arms, you couldn't touch him in the rowing. He was good in the weightlifting. There were certain things where, and also the shot putter, Bobby Oldfield, like he was another guy that made some money in that because he used to be able to pump a lot of iron. His running skills were pretty good. Like these were guys, it was good because you learned about people from other sports about what they could do.
It'll be sad though if we found out after the fact like these guys were like taking steroids to be good in the Superstars. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think they did that.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, at that point in time, there was hardly any knowledge of what steroids long-term stuff was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, an Olympic guy would certainly know. I mean, they all knew, but yeah, I wasn't thinking about that then. But I did think about, like, I remember some guys couldn't swim, some guys could not ride the bike. Like, some guys, great athletes, were just feeble in some of these events too.
Some of them had trouble at the 1500. They couldn't do the longer run.
So. Yeah, long run. I mean, that's a lot of these like hockey and football, and these are sprint games. That's all about sprinting quickly, quick stops and starts. They're not endurance games at all. I mean, they always joke around about players are tired after a minute and a half shift, and they're like looking like they're at the end of their rope. Sometimes they're 2 minutes. If a shift gets to 2 minutes, they're professional athletes. I remember my wife, busting on me saying these guys are supposed to be really in shape. I said, well,
it's a different kind of shape.
Just doing some cursory research here. Gretzky was 21 at the time. Bjorn Borg was 26.
Okay.
Sugar Ray Leonard was, let's see, he was born in 1950. He was the same age as Borg, so he was 26.
He was in his prime.
Right, and Pele was older than
he was 40, and he came in third place.
There's no way that if you ask me right now, like to place a bet on who would win, a 21-year-old Gretzky or a 26-year-old Sugar Ray Leonard, that I would say that Gretzky would win that.
Agreed. I would say Sugar Ray
Leonard. There's no way in the world. I mean, like
I would have said that because anybody who had watched the boxers perform, no, they're not sprinters.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
When they do road work, they're just
but they're not
long distance. Yeah,
but they're not doing the 5,000 meters where they're running at pretty good speed for long distance. They're running for endurance.
You would have thought Borg could do better at 26. I mean, he was a great athlete. As far as tennis, you have to have a lot of endurance. But yeah, he
was too busy partying with McEnroe. He retired. He was retired by then, Russ.
26. I don't think he was retired yet.
He retired at 25. He retired at 25.
I thought he retired a little later. Okay.
Yeah. The other element of this too is this was in an era when like hockey players were not notoriously out of shape in the off season. They really would do nothing. So you would come to training camp back in that, or when I first started, that was still going on. I mean, today in today's world, and I think it's true in all sports. You're in condition year round, like you're constantly, working out. But we kind of on the pre-show here, we kind of buried the lead, which is Damar Hamlin addressing his team. Like I just can't. We've become so accustomed in sports to having these negative outcomes for these situations, and this is such a positive outcome that it's just really heartening.
Yeah.
That,
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable that he's recovered, and all the worry we had over the 9 minutes that he was given CPR, and he had to be shocked, hit with the paddles, and yet here he is. He's talking to his team. He woke up, wanted to know who won the game.
Right.
Like I love the whole story, and all the negativity that people had on social media. About the whole thing. People just like to jump to conclusions when sometimes you got to let it play out, and sometimes there's a positive outcome.
You do.
And there was a lot of anti football stuff. When I thought that was sort of ridiculous. But going a quick thing around the panel here before we start. So the NFL, and it isn't official yet, at least it's
not official yet.
Okay, but the talk is that if it ends up that it's Buffalo versus Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, that because of Buffalo only playing 16 games and Kansas City playing 17, they will play the AFC Championship game at a neutral site. Kev, do you think that's a good compromise? I
mean, yeah, if you really – I guess it is. That's probably the way to do it, because I really support the idea that they shouldn't replay that game. I think that – yeah, I know, but I'm saying I'm totally in favor of that. I don't even like the kind of thought that and I think it's both sides are happy with that. So they're obviously just trying to make it fair, and I do. I guess I do support it.
Ross?
Yeah, I support it. I think it makes sense. I saw somebody saying maybe Indianapolis is a good place.
Yeah, they said Indianapolis, Atlanta, or I think maybe New Orleans was the possibility. All three of them will be domes.
Right. Picking the dome is the best idea, because then you can never fall back on they had better weather or worse weather than they would have it kind of takes that argument out of it too.
And Indianapolis,
they couldn't take Detroit because it's Buffalo's home field. I mean,
no. The supposedly Ford Field, the true they played more. They're more
I'm
than
just joking. Like I know why they didn't. So.
Do you know why? Do you know why? Because I know they have an event planned, but nobody in Buffalo could in Detroit for Ford Field that weekend. There's an event planned, which is strange because if they thought they were going to make the playoffs, why would they plan some sort of concert or whatever on a Sunday or Saturday? But it's not available that weekend. I hadn't heard what the event was.
I don't know what it is. I've heard that it was an event, but I just assumed it was a concert. But I mean. Concerts are such huge money for arenas that, like we just think, well, why would you do that if you get the playoffs? But they do it because the take is so great.
The difference between the building being empty and having a concert in there is
like it's not even a close call.
Well, you can't set up a stage in 24 hours, so I don't have a problem with it. And apparently, what's going to happen is the battle now is going to be for the bye. So if Buffalo wins and Kansas City loses, they'll get the bye. But if it's those two teams in the AFC Championship game having a bye or playing in a neutral site, that's the best of a bad situation. Eck, do you have any issue with that?
I like Indianapolis because it's drivable for both. Like it's a
halfway
mark. And so you can get you can give half the season tickets holders have a
that's a good point, Eck. Good point.
And that'd be fun. I think it'd be fun if you give half the season ticket. People will do that for sure. Any season ticket holder will drive that. It's probably like 5 hours from each, roughly.
6, probably 6.
Better than going in Indianapolis than freezing in Buffalo. I'm sure I'd jump at that.
Yes, and then imagine a stadium where you had a legitimate one side of it being Bills fans and one side of it being Chiefs fans. That'd be really cool. I mean, it would be something that would really be a lot of fun.
Especially if they would agree to only wear their team's colors. It would be fun.
That'd be great.
I mean, it would be
put it right down the middle, and nobody's allowed in unless you're wearing either the.
Yeah, right. You got it, and then that'd really be something.
As long as Bills fans don't wear their third jersey, which is red, then they'd confuse everything. So
yeah.
Oh, good God.
All right, let's move on. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, January 6th, 2023.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world and the news that is fit to be talked about. And we have, first of all, I guess we should start with World Junior Champion, Team Canada. And, the thing is really I want to say a couple things about this game real quick. Okay, first of all, Bedard doesn't have a big game in this game, which is, everyone's jumping all over him. That's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, this was, listening to Bob McKenzie, who I trust in this kind of a thing pretty well, saying this was better than Gretzky's 1979 World Championship. I think that's pretty good. That's saying something, right? So, I mean, this was a heck of a tournament for him, obviously. But I was also, and this is a real hat tip to the Czechs. The Czech defense really did what looked impressive to me. Like quite a few of their defenders, when they were one-on-one with Bedard or Wright, we're taking them. We're doing it. And it was something. It was like something to watch. Like they have that one guy that's just huge. The one Czech defender who's like Chara size. I don't know what his name is.
Juracek's close, and then Svozel's really good.
But then all of them. I mean, and the one who I guess is the son of a former player,
David Spacek.
Right, Spacek. I'm sorry about the names of this, but I was impressed by all of them. I mean, because every time Bedard was one-on-one, and the other Bedard was one-on-one a couple times with these guys, and they just did the right move, and Bedard didn't know where to go. It was fascinating. A lot of other teams couldn't handle him like that. So there's definitely some talent on that Czech defense.
Well, as was determined early in the tournament, the advantage of the Czechs bringing back, I think, Russ, it was 19 players who played on the Czechia team in August. That was definitely an advantage. And, I mean, really, they poleaxed Canada in the first game in the round robin. And here they come back down 2-0 in the third period, score a couple goals, and it was a nip and tuck battle. So I give the Czechs a lot of credit. I think they played fantastic.
I don't think there is a more emotional hockey tournament than this one. As far as
it's not.
So like when a team gets on a momentum thing, it's a big momentum. It's and when a team gives up a goal, it's a big drop.
Like live and die with every
You do, and when they scored the first goal, I had no question in my mind they were going to tie it. It just was the weird thing, like they didn't deserve to tie that game. But we had no question that they were going to. I mean,
there's one thing. There's two things that I took out of the tournament. Well, the first thing was I was right about the U.S. defense being too small. They were, and that was a mistake of choosing the roster the way they did. I still don't know if they'd beaten Canada, but they still could have done better than they did. Still, meddling is meddling, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do think the two things that have proven out, at least from this tournament, were I don't think enough people were paying attention at how good Juracek was, and there's a reason why a bunch of us wanted the Flyers to take Juracek instead of Cutter Gauthier. Flyers went with a position need, that's fine, but Juracek can be a real dominant game changer. And Logan Cooley, there was a lot of discussion about how good Logan Cooley is, and the team that's probably going to get second guessed on that, if Nemec isn't the superstar, they're going to have Logan Cooley there. Why didn't you pick him? And that could be not that far down the road. Logan Cooley looked great. And Shane Wright looked great too, by the way. I mean, that was the big argument, like who was better, Cooley or Wright? And they both represented themselves well. So there was a lot of talent on display. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, they really did.
Kev, the funny thing is, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, my take on this is it was fun to see the tournament be competitive again. It had been a while since we had, Slovakia was good in that tournament.
Yeah.
The Czechia was really, really good. And, there was a chance that someone other than the U.S. and Canada or either Sweden or Finland was going to win that tournament. I mean, the Czechia was certainly close to winning it. So I was appreciative of the fact because it's been a while. It's been a while since, they've medaled or been up there, and they had a real good chance.
2001, I think.
Yeah. So I really like that. And Juracek, I thought, was probably one of the top three players in the tournament. Like, he was really good in that.
Well, because, Russ, Kev, and I were watching the gold medal game in August, Canada-Finland, and that went to overtime, and that went 3-on-3 overtime, and so did last night. And I don't know. I mean, I'll just get your opinions on this. I know it could go 3 overtimes or it could go to a shootout, whatever the IIHF rules. I don't know about 3-on-3 overtime and that determining the tournament. I mean, I'm a little questioning on that, but I wanted to see what everybody else thought.
I'll let Kev go first.
Yeah, I would prefer 5-on-5 for that, just because, this always has an NHL feel to it, and that's just kind of the NHL way. But maybe that's expecting too much of, teenagers. That's, because what if that went 4 or 5, periods? So I could see why they do it. But, I would have preferred to see someone win it in what looked like a regulation game. I tell you what I do like, though, and I wish the NHL would do it. If you're going to stick with the shootout, go 5. 5 makes it more legitimate in my mind.
I completely agree with that. It does. It makes it more of a team game.
Yep.
I don't like the shootout at all. I would prefer 5-on-5 for a period of time. Maybe you go 10 minutes, and then after that, you want to start stripping down a player each. That's fine. But I think they should start at 5-on-5.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because it was such a weird vibe to it, because in that
the
situation
pace was insane for a little while.
It would go back and forth, though. It would go back and forth. Because one thing you saw the teams did not want to do is everybody was only going to score off the rush. Like when they got the puck into the zone with all their players and all the other teams' players into an offensive zone, they would pass out of the zone and they would come back out. It was really fascinating. They did it like 4 or 5 times at the beginning of the overtime. They would pass it back into their own zone and try to come back in off the rush. It was obvious that the whole concept of, if we've got 3 guys in the zone, one mistake is a 2-on-1 the other way.
Right.
So they continually.
Yeah. They did it the NHL way now. I mean, that's the way we're playing in the NHL.
Right.
Pulling it back out, not making don't make a mistake. It's so, they've taken really the fun out of 3-on-3. The coaches,
really, they make it so you.
They really have. The only problem, Russ, with and I see your perspective, but I think you can't start on 5-on-5 and end up 3-on-3 because it just feels like you've kind of cheapened it. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to start 5-on-5. We should continue all the way through with it. I wouldn't like seeing taking players off as we moved along. I would just, if we're going to start with 5-on-5, let's go all the way through with that.
Yeah.
But it was a really entertaining tournament. The games were fun. I mean, that crazy U.S. bronze medal game. I mean, 8-7. That was just absurd.
I'll say this in the most positive way. That game was stupid, and by stupid I mean it was extremely entertaining. But honestly, it's like when one team is up 6-5 and then or 5-2, and then the other team comes back and it's back and forth. I mean, the U.S. score with less than a minute to go, Russ, and then Sweden scores with the they pulled with like 12 seconds. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, it was
Well, it was like 1980 style hockey where mistakes were crucial. You know, as soon as one of the teams would make a mistake defensively, it was in the net. So
really, very much so.
I do want to answer something to GSM in the chat room. He said Shane Wright won't have a better career than Sam Bennett. He will. Shane Wright was captaining a Canadian team that if you don't win gold, you get killed. He was playing complete 200-foot game. And when he went down to the AHL, did you not see the goals he scored in a short amount of games? Like, come on, man.
Well, let's talk about Wright, because Ack put it in his blog that it was already announced that Wright, like, shockingly, we knew this was going to happen, is going back to the OHL. I seriously doubt, and I looked it up, Kingston's in third place in their division in the OHL. Now, maybe they can make a run for the playoffs, but there's been too much talk. Jeff Merrick has talked about it on Sportsnet a lot, that they're fielding offers from a number of OHL teams to trade him because they could get an absolute boatload for him, because he's not going to be in the OHL next year. So this is basically a rental for a team running for the Memorial Cup. So he's going to go London or North Bay or someplace like that, and he's going to play into the spring in a playoff scenario. So I can't see how that's bad for him when all he'd be doing in Seattle is sitting there and practicing all the time. If they're not going
to, it'll be fine. You know, the issue is when he went last year. In his draft year, he didn't have a great team, and he tried to make everybody on his team better, which is what would happen again if he goes back there now. But if he gets traded to a team that's on a playoff trajectory, you'll get to see how great the guy is, because then he won't have to worry about trying to make everybody better. They'll be better.
And star players always get traded in the – I mean, Tavares got traded, I think, for Oshawa. So that always happens.
It's just crazy, you know, and they I just saw one of these trades. Windsor picked up 2 players for their playoff run, and they gave up 11 draft picks.
Oh, yeah.
Like how fun is that? You know,
I know.
They gave up 11 draft picks. But, you know, we've talked about this before. Really, he's outgrown the CHL, the Ontario Hockey League.
Yeah.
But he can't go to the AHL. Like, it would be better if he could go to the AHL, but, you know, it doesn't work that way, and I understand why. You know, you got to try to preserve the, that system. So, you know, you can't let them, you got to send them back when they're at the right age. So I get all that, but he would really benefit by going to the AHL and playing against.
Yeah. I've talked before. My thing, Kev, that they should do there is have the exemption for first-round draft picks. If you're a first-round draft pick, you can play in the AHL. And that, I think
the problem with that, there's so many teams now. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of it would be 32 players a year, and, you know, as one of the GMs said to me, think about taking the best 32 players out of that. Those teams.
What would solve all of this would be a 19-year-old draft. If there was a 19-year-old draft, none of this conversation would matter anymore.
The unfair thing, and then we talked to Joe Yerdon about this, is that players drafted in the first round who are European-based players, like Kulich, who had 7 goals in the World Junior, or Isaac Rosine, who was a first-round pick of the Sabres, they're playing in Rochester because unless they're drafted in the import draft in the CHL, they're playing in Sweden or Finland or wherever, and they can come over to North America as an 18-year-old and play in the AHL. Whereas these, you know, Wright and some other CHL players, they are stuck in a sense until they turn 20, and I think it's by December 31st of that year. If he's 19 and turns 20 before December 31st, they can play in the AHL, but he's too young to play in the AHL, and I think that would have benefited him. So I think there needs to be a revision, like a 1-player waiver per team, but they're never going to go for it.
Yeah, I mean it's so complicated. I mean it's different, but there's some similarities like the college football and the portal. Like it was all good intentions in terms of, before there was some indentured servitude that was going on with players. They'd get stuck and not play. They get behind, other high caliber players, and then you'd have to transfer out and sit a year. It was really it was tough on players. Yeah. So in order, this in theory corrects that, because you can just enter the portal and then, teams can almost like bid on you now. I mean, they can tell you what their licensing money is going to be and all that. But more importantly, it's just chaos in college football. Like nobody works anything out. Like as soon as there's one problem, you're in the portal, and if you're not starting, you're in the portal. So every time you make a change, you create another problem. And I fear if we made a change with there's something we're not thinking about that, would cause issues as well.
Oh, yeah. There's a good question in the chat room from David asking, could Wright play in the SHL? I mean, he would have to be on loan from the Kraken, and he may not want to go over there. Like again, you're talking about now in the middle of a season, that's a kind of a hard transition. So I don't know if it's the best thing.
Yeah, no, but that's a great question, because I said that before too. Like he would have been better off going over to Switzerland or Sweden than doing what he did like that. That's a good half step to take.
But Seattle led him to believe he could play there, and they didn't really play him.
Well, I think they thought he could.
I didn't think they'd have any idea how good they'd be either. Seattle, they thought he was coming. I mean, based on last year, they thought, hey, he's going to be one of our better players.
Yeah, no, that's right on, Nick. They didn't anticipate they'd be fighting for a playoff spot, I'm sure.
Again, I'm going to still bristle and tell you that there's players in that lineup that if you had Shane Wright in there instead of that player, you'd still be okay, and it wouldn't affect anything that's going on. But again, I still think this is a function of the coach too, a little bit.
Well, no, but what might affect Shane Wright, though? You had him in there. At the end of the day, you probably do think this is the right move for Shane Wright, right?
Yeah, I mean, considering he's not going to play, only because the coach basically won't play him.
It's the best option of those available. I mean, if the best option would be to play in the American Hockey League, but since that's not available, the best option for him is to play every day and play for the best team that he can, and have a long stretch in the OHL playoffs in the Memorial.
We have to look at how ridiculous this is in one way, simply because when they sent him down to Coachella, he had 4 goals in 5 games.
Yeah.
So if he was going to be one of the best goal scorers in the AHL, and his name wasn't Shane Wright, and he didn't play earlier in the season for Dave Haxtell, Ron Francis would be putting pressure on Haxtell to put him in the lineup.
Yeah.
But they're not doing that.
This goes to what I've talked about before on this, and, it's a pipe dream because it's never going to happen. But, what if everybody just decided, instead of having, the fourth line grinders, the big, heavy players, you just take 3 of your most skilled younger players and you throw them out there, and you dealt with that.
Yeah.
And it would almost become, like they do in high school tennis, where the number 1 plays the number. So when your fourth line kid line was out there, you'd throw out your, fourth line kid line. Now it wouldn't work like that, because you're going to want a home matchup and you want to take advantage of that. But I don't know, would you be worse off if you just played? Like, what if you took your best AHL line, your number 1 line, and at the middle of the year, you just brought that line up? Because, down in the AHL, they're scoring a lot of goals. You put them out there and you played them the 10 or 12 minutes.
I mean, that's what the Sabres did after the lockout. They brought up 2 lines.
Yeah.
2 lines from they brought up 2 lines.
I just wondered, how that would change the game, instead of having, guys, you suddenly have
development. It would help development a lot.
Right.
Yeah. I'll just say this. It's like, in a way, and I'm sure that the organization is happy that this is happening, but Shane Wright is a sort of a victim of Seattle's success so far this season. They're in the playoff race. They played really great against Toronto last night. They beat them 5-1. They're a solid team. They're not spectacular, but they're getting good goaltending out of Martin Jones. Their defense is good. They have deep forwards. They're going to be in the race. And if they weren't in the race, if they were like down around where Arizona or Chicago was, they'd probably be playing Shane Wright and accepting the mistakes that a 19-year-old kid would make.
I think the point here is that he's not maybe making that many mistakes, and that the Hackstall just doesn't trust him.
That's what it is.
And the issue, and then that's the bottom line is, he's not a guy who makes a lot of mistakes. Like, he might not be scoring, but when you watch him play on the ice, he's solid positionally. He's always in the right spots. Like, he might not be putting up a goal a game, like you would want somebody who's drafted third or fourth or whatever overall. But he's not going to hurt you on the ice. Like, he's never going to hurt you out there. He's a solid two-way player, and maybe you don't want him to become a solid two-way player. I remember when kind of the player I always think of is Simone Gagne when he came into Philadelphia. Right, it was pretty high prospect, a first round draft pick, I believe, and he was seriously considered a scorer. He came into Mike Keenan's team, at that point with the Flyers, and Mike Keenan made him a defensive player. And he said, I'll play you, but you got to get better defensively. And Gagne got better defensively to the point where he was on Team Canada as a defensive player at one point. You remember in the Olympics, he was like there as one of their defensive forwards. Gagne was that well respected as a defensive player, and still managed to get goals as time went on. Still had scoring options. So yeah, I think that. I mean, you're not maybe playing to right strengths all the time, with what they're doing with him, and what they expect from him, I guess. But it does bring me to another question I have, which I think was kind of my thought for today. Was this after seeing that Seattle game last night in Toronto? Why the hell, Kevin? Our expansion team so good so quickly. Like, what is going on? Like, how can this be? Like, it happened once with Vegas, right? And we were good right away. And this team, we thought, oh, this is a normal team. Seattle's a normal team. They had a terrible first expansion year, but now this is only the second year. This is not. This
is more perplexing though, because we saw when Vegas got a lot of quality players, and they got a lot of assets that they were able to turn into other players.
Right.
So that one was understandable. I think the Seattle one is more of a mystery. Like, you look at that team. I mean, Bernier's was quick to develop, so he's looked really, really good. That's kind of helped him, and all the guys that think, because when after Ron Francis drafted, I think all of us thought he didn't really do a great job.
Yeah, he didn't do a good job at all, right? But that's what you're saying.
Yeah, didn't, but they've kind of turned around. So I have no idea. I mean, I would say this. Just one more thing about the right thing, and I think the person to answer this is Russ. Because I don't really have an answer for this. Like, I would want to keep Wright if I was Seattle, because I just think you learn, by being part of the organization, and I think he would get better. Do you think for development purposes, Russ, is it better for him to go to a league where he's already dominant? He's going to be great. I mean, I guess you can argue that it was going to be good for his confidence. So would he be better off, even if he didn't play more than 10 minutes, to stay with Seattle where he's with a NHL team? I don't have an answer for that.
I know. I've heard Ron Hextall say when a guy goes back, he could always do better. Like, if he isn't leading the league in scoring, then league in scoring. You be the best player. But I also have seen in recent years, if a guy could get 10 minutes of ice time, I'd say keep him in the NHL. If you're going to give him 7, then no. But if you give him 10, I think he can develop under 10.
And another factor here is he played 8 games with Seattle, and they don't want to burn the first year of the ELC. So now they get 3 years. He develops more. Maybe he doesn't develop as well as he would if he was with Seattle, Kev. But they buy another year at $950,000, and that with it, I think Seattle, what they did was they used the first year as sort of an evaluation year on a bunch of guys that they claimed or traded for. And then what they did, it's amazing what a manager can do when you have a clean slate in this league. You've got so many teams desperate to dump players that are good, that are making too much money. Like, Yanni Gourde, I'm sure Tampa would have loved to have kept him, but they couldn't afford to keep him. Yanni Gourde's a quality player for Seattle, and they had they had free money in free agency, and they got Burakovsky and they got a couple other players. It's amazing what you can do when you have a budget that you can sign players.
When you have money to spend. Mike, the big question is, and I'm not being a jerk, I'm looking it up. Yeah. Murray's lost 3 out of his last 5. What do you think?
The Leafs haven't played well in the last while. One of those 3 games he lost to the Rangers. That wasn't a bad performance. He gave up 2 goals. He played really well.
That's fair.
Last night he was terrible. The game against Arizona, the whole team was terrible, but he was great against Colorado. So, right now the Leafs, and this happens in Kev, that this happens when a team has a bunch of injuries, everybody sucks it up. It's 5-man team defense. It's everybody rallying, and they play basically above the head with, half of an AHL lineup. And then everybody comes back and everybody breathes a sigh of relief. And then there's a little bit of complacency there because, they think, okay, all of our talent's back. We can win without really trying so hard. And they're not. So that happens sometimes. So right now they're in a little bit of a funk. I don't think they were as good as they were when they were playing with, half of the Toronto Marlies defense, and they're not as bad as they're playing right now.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean that does happen, and it prompts, crazy talk from like Tom Laidlaw, who said that, after Hedman got hurt, that the Lightning were better off with Hedman hurt because everybody was better.
That is crazy talk.
Yeah, that is just total crazy talk. But that was last year, and I called him out on it, and then he started laughing. He knew it was a ridiculous statement when he said it. But there is that sort of attitude in the NHL. It's like we'll all pull together.
Right.
Next man up. I really hate almost hate that phrase, that next man up stuff.
Yeah.
But it works in the NHL. Everybody knows when there's an injury that everyone's got to pull together. We got to do things differently. And despite the fact that everyone says we don't play any differently, depending on who's in net, they of course play differently depending on who's in net. They take fewer chances. And just go back to the days of Dominic Hasek. When the Buffalo Sabres played completely different than other teams in the league. They took more chances. The New York Rangers certainly played differently last season when Shesterkin was, so hot as well. So, yeah, but going back to X question, because it's a really good one. I just looked at their roster too. What's amazing about that team is, I don't know who you concentrate on to stop on that. Yeah, that's what makes it good. And, there's, in that regard, they are similar to Vegas. Like Vegas was a good team, and I think that's what kind of Seattle. When you look at that team, they don't have any one difference maker, but they got a bunch of guys who, when you combine them, the sum of all their parts is pretty good.
They have two number 2 lines and 2 number 3 lines. Like their 4th line has Daniel Sprong, who's got 11 goals right now. So they're getting a lot of production out of their 4th line, but they don't have a star line. I mean, the closest thing they have is the line that Beniers is on. Beniers is playing really well.
Yeah, Beniers is a star.
He's not a star yet, but
he's a star, I think.
Right, but he's not like leading the team in terms of he's not a matchup guy, and the teams are not matching up against Matty Beniers.
By the end of the year, they will be.
Yeah, but the other area where they're following Vegas is, they're capped out.
Yes.
Like you look at them, and they got less than $2 million. They got all their guys tied up. They got very little maneuverability room. Right. They need someone to get hurt in order to make rooms most of the teams in the league. So.
And with the weird thing about Vegas, I mean, everybody always talks about how great the great players Vegas got, and I don't buy that completely. I really remember that all those players were let go by other teams, and they could have protected those players, except, and there were a couple trades that happened, so they would not take other guys. I know that, but all those players, every one of those players that went to the Stanley Cup Finals,
they were highly skilled guys, like Marcia. So everybody agreed he was highly skilled and probably was lost in the Rangers system. Carlson was a highly skilled guy. I mean, it's
You got
not like
you got Jaden Schwartz. You got guys like that.
it's not like they got like fourth liners that turned into first liners. Again, Jaden Schwartz, Seattle got him because he had some injuries, but when Jaden Schwartz plays, his point of the game is great.
Yeah, he's a great player, right? So I mean, and that was kind of I think they're very similar in terms of the way were built. As far as the way they looked.
Well, I think NHL general managers learned their lesson. There weren't situations out there where Columbus bribes Vegas to take David Clarkson's contract by taking this guy named Carlson, who ended up scoring 40 goals,
right?
Or the Marcus O'Reilly Smith situation, or Shea Theodore with Anaheim. I mean, those situations didn't happen with Seattle, where Seattle took advantage. And obviously, Seattle didn't make the Stanley Cup final in their first year, but where they took advantage is the fact that they had a lot of cap room, and they they traded guys they traded Yarncroke last year. They traded Giordano to Toronto. They ended up getting a lot of draft picks for those guys, but they decided on certain players, and then they locked them up. And some of them, I think, I'm not puzzled by, Adam Larson, who I've been a critic of for a long time, is playing pretty well with Seattle. I don't understand what they were thinking about with Grubauer, because Grubauer is not as good at goals.
That's the big difference between them and Vegas. Vegas got a proven goalie that was a major difference. Seattle basically took a chance. Martin Jones, Mike just said he played well. Or has played some good games, but I would never have guessed. So, although last time I looked, his save percentage was still below 900.
It's still not good. I mean, Martin Jones. Watching him in Philly, I'll say this about Martin Jones: watching him up close and personal, a bunch of games live last year. Just he gets lucky once in a while. He does. He has these games where he gets what looks to be incredibly lucky, and that's a really horrible thing to say, because I know you make your own luck, and I'm a goalie of all people to say.
I don't like to deal in these kind of negative things, but a reader once asked me, was last year or the year before, who the worst goalie in the NHL was that had a job, and I said Martin Jones. That name just came to me quickly because I knew he hadn't been below 900. Right. Because it's a crazy stat. Occasionally you'll see somebody throw it out there on Twitter. It's been 4 years ago in February, the last time he had a save percentage under or over 900.
My vote.
It's some craziness,
My vote would have been Peter Mrazek. And
I always kind of went Anton Forsberg, but I got to tell you, 3 years ago, I would have said the guy who made 64 saves yesterday. So,
yeah, Starl. By the way, that's interesting. Did you see how many players have had 64 or more? And do you know who they are?
I know.
I think Michael Layton did in the AHL, because I think my website covered it.
Ron Tugnut.
Yeah, he holds the record at 67. Yeah. So, and then there's another goalie that has I think 65. I think.
Is it only NHL or is it anything?
No, it's only NHL. And then there's one other. Joe Daly also had 63.
Joe Daly. Okay.
Must have been with Detroit back in the 60s.
No. Joe Daly? No, it was with Buffalo.
Oh, it was with Buffalo. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good guess in the chat room. Pete Peters, is that? I think.
No, but the other one is Lassard, played for the
Mario Lassard. Oh, yeah.
Played for the Kings. I think it was 80-81 or 81-82, somewhere in there. So
that was a lot of saves, man.
That was the year Charlie Simmer scored 56 goals. That was the wide open Kings of the Triple Crown line. I remember that. Wow.
Yeah. But that's crazy. And it just goes to show you about save percentage. I wrote on this morning for a gig that I did, so that's the only reason I know this. But when he gave up 3 goals in last night's game, and so his save percentage for the game was .955. So I was thinking, well, that's got to be. He actually, Saros has actually played pretty well of late. Of his last 11 games, 10 of those games he's been at .909 or more save percentage in the game. But I thought, well, that's got to be his high watermark for the last 4 or 5 games. But I looked it up, and he stopped 27 of 28 against the Ducks, and he was at .963. So even not, save percentage.
I was a little off on Michael Layton. He had 98 saves in the AHL in a 5 OT game that broke Johnny Bauer's record. 98.
Yo, that was an OT, right?
Yeah.
5 OTs. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is regular. That's
yeah.
what
I mean, that
I wasn't putting together regulation.
I mean, Russ, so you can't go into playoff OT situations because I was at one in 2017 or 2018 when it was the Marlies and Syracuse that I think Garrett Sparks and the other goaltender were both over 70. So it's like nuts. But Ack, do you want to talk about the all-star selections, or can we just pass by that?
Yeah, we can get into that, I guess. Let's get into that.
I mean, I think it's well established my disdain for the all-star game, but I mean, players deserve to get recognized. Do we remember? Is this the first time that they've done it where they've named the individuals, the ones for the teams, like all at the same time? Because usually they announce the entire team. I'm saying they announced the entire Atlantic Division, one guy, the entire Metro Division, one guy. Usually they announce the teams in total and then select 3 or 4 guys for fan voting.
Right. Haven't you done that before? You're right about that.
Yeah. And
I don't know about that. I would say that, anyone who diminishes the value of an all-star game or how much players care about it. I mean, I've said this before, but I like the fact that for the most part, Crosby shows up at these games, and for the most part, though not always, he's been suspended in the past. Ovechkin shows up for these games. So I always appreciate that. But I mean, what Kevin Hayes said, apparently, I mean, Russ can speak to it more than I can, but he was highly emotional.
Yes.
I'm sure he was. I mean, I would have put Travis Konechny in there ahead of him because Hayes got a lot of these points early, but I could see why he'd be emotional. And he had a good game yesterday, and he's had a great season.
I mean, for those who don't know, he said that his brother only asked him to do one thing when he made the NHL, which was to play in an All-Star game.
Okay, that part I didn't know.
Oh, he's told, and that's when he got emotional. He said, when I got in the NHL, he said my late brother said to me, I really want to see. I want to see you in an All-Star game. I want to see you as an NHL All-Star, and that's the only thing he'd ever ask him to do. So it was important to him. He was very emotional about it. So
that's great.
And of course, John Tortorella made a rather interesting statement regarding the All-Star game. Russ, do you have the specific quote, or?
I mean, he basically called it shit. I mean, that's all. He doesn't care. He won't watch the whole weekend. He sounded like Mike. Like that's what it was.
He does not, care for it. And
Kevin Hayes got nominated either.
I would be critical of him on that simply because, this sport pays him a huge salary.
I agree with you, 100%.
Huge salary, and this is part and parcel of what goes on. And it's just disingenuous to say, I'm proud to be an NHL coach, but I don't want to do all the things that go into all that. So, you just expect more from an NHL coach than that.
They named him the coach of the All-Star game. He would show up.
So
you'd have to.
Right.
But I mean, Kevin's right. I mean, you can't diss this if you're in the league. You're getting paid.
You can not like it and not, be interested in it, and but keep your opinion to yourself.
Exactly. I mean, if it was me, with what I believe in terms of the All-Star game, if it was me and I was in his position, I just would have said no comment. I would have just avoided it because it's a no-win situation in terms of saying what he said. I mean, he just opens himself up for criticism.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have said no comment because then people wonder why he didn't. I mean, all he had to say is, I'm happy for the guys that want to go to them.
I'm happy for Kevin, and
that's all you got to say.
Probably not.
That's true. The one thing I will say, and this goes along with what I was saying about Matty Beniers to Mike yesterday, he's a rookie. He got chosen to the All-Star team. Like, he's an All-Star. He's not like a young star. He's an All-Star.
Yeah. Who was that? I'm sorry.
Matty Beniers.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a star. I mean, he's not a superstar yet, but he's a star.
I think Torts, and we've talked about him before. I actually have had good experiences with Torts, but he's not exactly Mr. Sentimentality. And I go back to the Stanley Cup final. I maybe people remember this, but Dan Boyle's house burned.
I remember.
Significantly during the was it the final or
I think it was the final.
I think it was the final, And anyway, we interviewed Dan Boyle, and he was very emotional. A lot of his memories and trophies and photos and things were burned in that fire. He was very, very emotional. And then we talked to John Tortorella about it and asked him about, him being able to play and all that. And he goes, just sticks and bricks. Houses don't matter. Dan's going to be fine. It's no big deal. And we had just talked to him. And, and we asked Andrew Chuck about it. And he talked about, he said, that, they found out, they called and let the coaching staff and the captain let him know that what had happened to Boyle's house because he wasn't home. And Andrew Chuck said, yeah, I said to Tortorella, I'll tell him. You're not telling him.
That's smart.
Good yeah. Right there. Yeah, it was a good work on his part. So a couple of the players told Dan Boyle what had happened. He said he was very emotional about it. He goes, as we all would.
Of course.
He said, your life's all tied up. He said, your first thought is nobody's hurt. That's great, but those are things that mean a lot to him. So
yeah. Now, Ken, Larkin is the only Red Wing that's got to move the needle a little bit because now if they were to lose him, that's just another thing that makes it look worse if they lose him.
Yeah. What did everybody think of the Bissonnette thing? I thought Larkin handled it well, but also pointed out to Bissonnette, hey, this is 15 minutes before I'm going out to play a game. I'm not thinking about whether or not.
What happened? I didn't hear this.
I didn't hear.
It's all over social media.
Okay, go ahead.
They do those pregame interviews, and they have a guy on just before he's going to go on the ice. Sometimes they do it on the ice. I mean, I just saw one this week where Emily Kaplan got snowed by Evgeny because Kuznetsov. Did you see that?
No,
that tweet. Oh, it's just a fabulous tweet. I guess Kuznetsov just came by and she's talking to Ovechkin just in one of those pregame things, and he comes by and he just totally snowed her. She's wearing a black suit and the ice chips coming. It's all over her face, and it was just that it's a ridiculous thing to do. Like Ovechkin looked at him like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
Anyway, they were doing one of these with Larkin, but they were doing it as outside the locker room before he was going on the ice. And they were asking him, and apparently they were lauding the fact that Bissonnette, is a journalist who's going to ask hard questions. But is that where you ask hard questions before the guy's going on the ice?
No.
And so he asked, what's the deal? Are you going to be a Red Wing next year? I mean, are you making any progress?
Really?
Yeah. Everything else. And he goes, I'm going on the ice in 15 minutes. I'm certainly not thinking about that. And, he just said, I hope to be a Red Wing, and left to go at that. But there's been a lot of debate on social media whether that was appropriate or not.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
If I'm TNT, I'm like, listen, there is a line that you could cross as a journalist that you don't feel like you could cross because you're a player talking to a player, but there was a line, and that was it.
See,
that's a great point, Russ. I think that's why he asked that. He thought he could because he's an ex-player. Because we wouldn't
even worse because a player knows what's going through a guy's head before he goes on the ice. Like to me,
now that's a great point too.
Me, like a journalist is different. Like we're just out to get the story right, but the player knows the mental preparation involved.
Yeah, it's one thing if you're asking that question like after the game in the hall outside of the locker room, but remember Bissonnette is part of that group. The podcast where other players have gotten in trouble for certain things, and it's not like back in the day a podcast or a pre thing for a broadcast that goes out to everybody and everybody hears it, and there are ramifications if you say something. So yeah, it's not.
Here's what I would say to State of Survival, because he said he's just being straightforward, but they're in a privileged position where they could talk to a guy while warming up, where nobody else talks to any players, mics them up, or does anything while they're warming up. And it's a terrible thing to ask a guy while he's trying to focus on a game.
Well, I think what's important here, and I think that sometimes we all can miss the boat with this. I know I can, but definitely. We're looking at it from our perspective, like from we cover things, we've talked to these, we've been in these, not in this situation, but we're in a situation where we're interviewing people, right? We're journalists. There's an ethical part to that. We know what to do, what not to do, things like that. And even like when it comes down to what we just talked about with Tortorella, that's obviously wrong. We'd all say that's obviously wrong. You shouldn't do that. NHL pays you. fans love that. Like they love hearing the honesty of him. They'll say, you know, how honest he's being, how real he's being.
Yeah, that's fine on the panel.
And I think that. So I think for us to sit back and say, well, yeah, it's not right of him to do that, because if we were him, we wouldn't do that. Maybe if that was our job, we wouldn't do that. But at the same time, like they love this and that. They you know, people like they.
But would Bissonnette have loved it if somebody on, let's say, NBC,
I'm not
while he was warming up for a game, said, "Hey, Paul, by the way, you've just been cut."
Again, there's several angles I wrestle this, and I'm trying to take myself out of our position for a second.
Right, I just did. I took ourselves out
because you're still like Bissonnette. Like, no, to me, that's like still looking at Bissonnette's job, what he has to do. I mean, I know from a journalistic point of view, the first thing that goes in my head is like, well, they're not going to let people talk to the people in the locker room again, like right before a game, if Bissonnette continues happening. But that's not what we're talking about either.
I don't watch the TNT because I don't watch NBA games that much, but you never hear Shaq or Charles Barkley or Kenny Smith on that put a player on the spot like that. They don't do it.
Now, players shouldn't do it. I agree. And Bissonnette, as you know, I think he's going for something that he overshot for sure, and he didn't, because he doesn't have journalistic ethics. Probably more the fact he's just a player.
Well, I mean, I think he has some, but.
But, you know, he hasn't necessarily had it drilled into him because he's a player who's given this job. Like, you know, you're given this. If you're one of us, you have to prove to everybody out there that you're worthy of being in the room or whatever, talking to people. And if you ask some stupid question, you're going to get called on it. You know, not Kevin, or you know, maybe at this point, you know what I'm saying. But if you're somebody starting off,
but you will if you ask it in an inappropriate time, or I mean, there's almost a protocol. By the way, I thought that's a good point you made, because you're right. I think the fan base probably did watch that and said, "Wow, you know, hardline journalists." But you know, we're really getting down to the lowest common denominator out in the fan world these days. So anyway, but I think it is a good point, and we don't often think about that. But for those who don't know, there is kind of a protocol. I mean, you know, if you've been around a long time, you understand how it works. You know, for example, when you're in a scrum with a player, most journalists will not ask, because everyone's looking to fill what they need for their particular story. So you ask the easiest questions first, the ones that are not going to cause any controversy, because you want everybody to get what they need. And then if there's anything really difficult that needs to be asked, it's always done at the end. I mean, you know, it's just nobody's ever said that to anyone, but everybody understands that. That's how it works. You know,
it's annoying if someone asks a specific question, or in the beginning, a specific question like, you know, this is you've had on 12 power plays in the last 3 games or whatever. What do you think? You know, they don't want those kind of questions in the beginning, because it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and if you're a beat writer and you have talked to Dylan Larkin, there's a lot of stuff going on today. I'm getting alerts. And you've talked to Dylan Larkin about his contract, and you've done stories on it, and you know he's weary of talking about it. You let it go for a while.
Yeah.
Like, you know, no one has talked to Dylan Larkin about his contract in a while in Detroit, because we know nothing has changed. So, but at some point, and I don't know when that is, somebody will say, you know, it's time for us to go back at Larkin. You know, so and we will. But you know, there's some respect. You know, you can't talk to him about it every day, at least for some circumstances. There are some circumstances, I can't give you an example, where you do have to talk to him every day. You got to go in every day and ask the same question.
But if you have a good enough relationship with the player, you can say, listen, just please keep me updated on this kind of thing.
No, it is. But there are times when, and it's just not coming to me. Maybe you guys can think of some, but you know, you got to ask every day.
Well, I'll tell you,
trade deadline.
I'll tell you one. I was doing work for SiriusXM. The Tampa Bay Lightning just got eliminated from the Devils in the playoffs. I needed to talk to Martin St. Louis. I could tell he wasn't having the greatest moment. I gave him a few moments. I went up to him and I asked him about the loss. And he looks at me and goes, "Really?" And I'm like, "Marty, I just need the soundbite. Like, I'm here just for the soundbite. If you give me the soundbite, I'll leave." He did. He gave me the soundbite. I left.
Yeah. Well, you know, oftentimes if a guy's the subject of trade rumors, you know, you got to go every day and you kind of smirk and say, "Heard anything?" You know, and they, you know, and usually they get it, but you know, there's you know the right time to ask questions, and you know, it's not like you see on television where guys are always in someone's face, asking them rough questions, and
Right.
it's just not like that in the real world.
So. Yeah, but I know you have to go at 2, so if you have to drop off, I'll just finish off the show with a couple things.
Thanks, Kev.
Yep. See you later, man.
Thanks.
Couple notes here, Akin, if you got any rumors to finish off the show. But Brant Clark, Russ, he is going back to the OHL. Barry Colts, Brad Lambert, who played for Finland in the World Junior. He played 14 games for Manitoba. He's going to play for the Seattle Thunderbirds.
Finally. I mean, I was asking for them to have this happen at the start of the year. I didn't understand why this didn't happen. He needs that. He needs the games. And Brant Clark played really, really well. So I was very happy for him. But no, this is great for Lambert.
Yeah, both of these, as per Jeff Merrick, he just posted them on.
No, I talked about Lambert should be going to Seattle last year. Like, they had his rights.
Yeah, and
understand it.
And they're the number 1 team in the CHL right now. So they have I think the Memorial Cup is in Kamloops this year. So, Seattle will have to go through the WHL playoffs.
It's the right thing for Lambert because he's close. He's like in between right now of what he could be.
Right.
Yeah. Rumor-wise, working on a couple things for this afternoon. Nothing really big yet, except I would say to keep an eye on New Jersey right now. The Devils are falling fast. They are only a couple points out of 4th place in the division, and they have lost a bunch of games. And there's a lot of inner turmoil going on there right now, and a lot of stuff. Like from what I've heard from talking to a source today, the Lindy Ruff thing, which was a problem in the beginning of the year, remember? And everybody was like, "Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine when you're winning." You know what I mean?
Right.
The second you start losing, those things pop
back up.
They find their way in again, right? And I wonder, I don't know.
Well, I wonder what's going on with the goaltending there because, like, last night they called up Akira Schmid to play, and so I don't know if there's a lingering injury issue with Blackwood or what, but they're not getting the goaltending they did a month ago, and they're I think the record now in the last 11 is 3-7-1. So they've cooled off significantly. They're getting Palat back. I think actually he's back already. So that might help. But yeah, I mean,
quick rumor. I may have to 1 second. Hold on, I got to take this call. I'll be right there.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say about this is, it's not unsurprising that the Devils were going to have a dip, but they would have been better off having a dip, but having their goaltending still be solid. Now, if they start having goaltending questions, we're right back to where you were last year, except you were in a really great spot. They're going to make the playoffs, but if they go with these goalies and nobody is hot by the time they start the playoffs, they're not going to last long. And that's a shame because, again, like, I don't know, it's Blackwood. I just don't have the same faith in anymore. Vanacek, I think, is good. I don't think he's a long-term number 1. And Schmidt's been okay in moments, but that's it. He's just – so it's like, again, they have this problem, and it's going to have to be – somebody's going to have to step up there as goalie. If not, they're not going far in the playoffs.
Yeah, and there really isn't anybody in terms of a pending free agent goaltender that they could go out there and trade for, unless they think Jonathan Quick or something like that is an upgrade. And right now, Phoenix Copley is the number 1 with the Kings. So
yeah, you know what they'll do? They'll just they'll bolster their defense even more. They won't trade Severson, and they'll say, "All right, this will help the goalie," but it still may not.
Yeah. So I mean, everything went right the first 2 months for the Devils. They started to cool in early December. And then basically around the middle of December, they really started to struggle. Can they bounce back? Sure. But they mean, yeah. And Jake in the chat, we've talked about Anaheim trading John Gibson for 3 years?
Yeah. I don't think he wants to be.
Yeah. I mean, I would be, like a lot of players would be, but if he's happy playing in Southern California, he's got a no move clause. He's not going anywhere.
If you were playing for the Leafs and you were the goalie, you probably would want to stay there because you like that team growing up. And he likes the city. Like, he likes it there.
He's from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is probably the only place he would probably go.
Correct.
And you never know. That could be such a situation after this year because Jari's a UFA, but Pittsburgh's not going to trade Jari. Esmir's asking, what's your view of the Islanders? It's been the same view that I've had all year. I don't think they score enough. They might make the playoffs because their goaltending is so good, but I don't think they're a team that goes deep in the playoffs because I don't think they can beat the teams ahead of them in the division. I don't think they can beat Carolina or beat the Rangers, or even maybe New Jersey would be a competitive series.
Here's what I always say in this league. You're not always guaranteed just because you made it to the conference finals that you're getting back to the conference finals. Like you look at Tampa, they're an anomaly getting back to the Stanley Cup as many times as they have, Chicago before that. Sometimes you do get back to the conference finals multiple times, but it doesn't happen a lot. And so I think the Islanders have slipped away from that a little bit. Even last night. Last night was not a good game. And, you had Sorokin in there, but they didn't score. Yeah. So they will make a trade. They'll try and get some more scoring. It could just get them in there. But again, they do have some age on that third and fourth line, especially the fourth line, and guys who can get banged up. I think it's different from a couple of years ago because I think they're older. I think they really do need a small reset so they really can be a playoff dominant team. I don't think they're a playoff dominant team even if they make it.
So that rumor quickly right there was about Gossespierre possibly going to Ottawa. So keep an eye on that. I mean, we've talked about it before, but
you brought that up.
That's just it's a very good source of mine in relation to Shane. And I think that, I have him at 30% chance of going to Ottawa right now on the rumor chart. I'm probably going to boost up to about 60.
Which is bizarre because Ottawa at this point, right this moment, they're not really in the playoff race.
They have a mandate apparently within the organization to be competitive this year. Like
which is part of the
they want to be competitive, and they're not gonna go into tank mode.
I'm not saying that they're going to go into tank mode, but you can't really do it with all the guys that they've signed and the guys that they've traded for, like DeBrincat. But what I am saying is that clearly, we said at the beginning of the season, Russ and I said that their goaltending wasn't good enough. I didn't think that Talbot and Forsberg were going to move the ball significantly, and everybody is saying their defense is weak. Now, Gostisbehere helps that, but I don't know if he's the right type of defenseman because, they have Shabbat, they have Zub, they have Jake Sanderson. I think they need more of a defensive guy, but okay,
I think their feeling is they want to go. They're going for the high-powered Maple Leaf type thing. That's what they're looking at. They're trying to match the Leafs, and they don't have the offense to match the Leafs, but they have.
Their forwards are pretty damn good.
Forwards are good, and if they're going to go anywhere, they're close. If you're going to be competitive and you're looking at their team. And you're like, okay, yeah, to be a better rounded out team, we could add defense, but we'll probably stay out of the playoffs for sure. Their best bet is to just enhance what they have and go for it. And that's the impression I get from where they are coming. They say, okay, we're an offensive team, so we're just going to bring in more offensive players and get more offensive and try to overwhelm teams offensively. That's do they have the talent to do that? I don't know. But if nothing else. If you're a team that's trying to keep the marketplace happy, it's a more exciting brand of hockey to play too. So if you're going to lose trying to outscore somebody, maybe better than losing.
I'll tell you, Chychrun did not help anybody want to get him as a defenseman after yesterday's game against the Flyers. I mean, but
that was like one out of a number of games. Where he's been playing really well, Russ. They've been
a bad road team, and he's not been good on the road either. I don't think the market will be good for him, but it's not going to be good like Arizona thinks.
Yeah, and waiting on this deal. If you're waiting for that third big asset, and it's the difference between you making and missing and not making that deal, I don't get it. Bill Armstrong should be trading him right now.
Everybody said that about Sakic, and he did pull it off, but I don't think it's going to happen on this.
And in my opinion, with Sakic, and you're talking about make Sakic and Duchesne maybe like that right? Yeah. That was true, and everyone knew Duchesne wanted to be moved and all that stuff, and because he was never going to get the money that was going to McKinnon, but at the same time, he made peace with Sakic, and said, okay, we're not trading you this year. There were a couple times when he did that. And I think that at some point they have to make peace with Chychrun and say, we're not trading you this year. So you're here.
Yeah. Now, listen to these stats. So in his two home games recently, Toronto and Colorado, he had 4 points, and he's a +3. On his 3 road games, he has 1 goal, and he's a -4.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it also goes to show you, though, that, that you can match, if you match against Arizona, you're going to take them apart. That the Arizona has some weak spots,
Sure, but it still doesn't, again, this is why, we always say you can still be a plus guy on a bad team.
You can be, but when you can be a plus guy on a bad team, but if you're their top guy, like he's their top defenseman, he's going to go against he's gonna have it. Top defenseman on bad teams will never.
No, but Jay, I think, says it right in the chat room. He says he's been playing well offensively, which he has. He's got a lot of points. Defensively, he's been pretty bad. He looks disinterested. I think it's somewhere in between that.
Yeah, he looks disinterested because he wants to get the hell out of Dodge.
I think Mike has a point there. I really think that like if you're trying to impress people, like who are scouting you, have a good offensive game. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but that's not enough anymore because
it isn't. You're right. That's the mindset of a lot of
players. I know it used to be, yes.
But I think the teams that are interested know that he can do that. It's just right now he's not doing that.
Again, he definitely could do it offensively. He doesn't have enough of a resume where you're saying he's a rock solid defenseman. He doesn't.
Yeah, he's physical.
Yeah,
he's not a shutdown guy. But I think he has the ability to do that. But I don't think he's doing that right now. Just the thing, Ottawa is at 39 points right now. They're 7 points behind the Islanders at the halfway point. They have 38 games. They have 2 games in hand on the Islanders, so they could close the gap. But they've got 3 teams in between them: Detroit, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. So not saying that it's not possible for them to do that.
It's hard to move up and down, like we've talked about so many times. You're right, Mike.
The problem with Ottawa is they got the mandate, and we all thought they'd have a chance at the playoffs. But if they come in 12th and they had no chance at Bedard, they'd have wished they come in 11th just so they had that 0.1 or 0.2% chance.
Right. No, for sure. But I think
that's a tough place to be this year.
Real quick, before we get out of here, and I know we're running long, maybe we should wait to hold this off. But I wanted to mention this really quickly. Just throw this out there. Watching Bedard and Fantilli for the first time, like both watching them play a lot of games in a row for the first time together. I'm so with you on Fantilli, Russ. And I also think that Fantilli might be a better flyer than Connor Bedard, which is a weird thing to say because if I look at the way the Flyers, I can see Fantilli fitting onto the Flyers perfectly. Like the way he plays, his style, his game,
style,
his game, his size. The way he his energy level, he's like a better, bigger version of Konechny. Like he's got the whole thing. Like, and I'm not saying Bedard. Listen, Bedard might be the best player by far, but I would not be at all disappointed with Fantilli if I was a Flyer.
No, you shouldn't be. But the funny thing is, and this isn't an indictment of you, but a lot of people were saying that about Nolan Patrick in the draft too. Like
that's true. No,
and for a while he was a good flyer, but
injuries. I mean, obviously injuries. Like when Nolan Patrick was healthy, which was so rare, he did look great at times.
But Eck, you're not saying if Philly has the number 1 pick, you would
no, he's not.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
saying if they have 2 or 3 and they decided on Fantilli, he would not be upset.
Yeah, I'm saying that. Fantilli would be a number 1 pick in many years, as many people have said. Like he's the number 1 overall.
I think all 3 of them now could be Leo Carlson.
It's kind of like an Eichel McDavid type thing, maybe. Like McDavid being Bedard and Eichel being Fantilli. It feels like that.
Who's the Dylan Strome?
Well, it's not Carlson, and Carlson could still end up 2 also, even on my list. So that's what makes this one even a little tougher. But if you end up with one of those 3, you're really happy.
Yeah. I mean, I really saw when I saw Fantilli, I just saw flyer on him. Like, and it's happened a couple times with us.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I just not that Bedard obviously,
but most people think the Flyers are going to end up somewhere around the 7th or 8th pick.
Yeah. I mean, they probably will, and that's because of whatever, because of Carter Hart, essentially. But
and the coach not wanting to.
You're right, and not wanting to. And I'm always fine with that.
You heard what he said about tanking the other day, right?
No.
What basically Tortorella said was, well, that's now something that the coaches could use to drive them as a chip on their shoulder because we have no interest in doing that and we should be doing better. And so that's again. Right. Probably half the fan base wishes they didn't hear that. But
real smart there, Torts.
And they went 4 in a row, the Flyers went 4 in a row. That's like a thing, because everybody starts to think
it was before they won the fourth. It was like when they won 3 in a row. He said that.
Yeah, I just think that people are comparing Fantilli to Lafreniere in the chat room. No, definitely not. Like I don't see them as the same kind of player at all.
No.
We'll talk more about that.
We'll get more into that for sure. But I can say I just really saw it. Like who knows? Maybe it's like maybe I'm being maybe some prophet in my head is pointing at that's going to be in the future. But I just saw it. It was very clear to me that.
Oh, I can see it easily.
I don't know. All right, remember Without the Buzz, we are just hockey.
Are we?
I don't know. Remember Without the Buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow. Or no, Monday. Have a good weekend. Whatever. I'm doing my best.